Welcome to Powered by Passion. Welcome to the Powered by Passion podcast series. In this exciting new series, we'll be exploring the vibrant world of nuclear through the eyes of the next generation of professionals. We are exploring the stories of young, passionate individuals who are shaping the future of the sector, whether in energy, health, safety, technology innovation, space exploration, and beyond. Nuclear is alive, active, and innovative, and the young professionals driving this change are the keys of its future. Every month, we bring you fresh insights from across the nuclear field, stories of personal growth, career challenges, inspiration, and the powerful impact that nuclear can have on our world. So, whether you're just starting your journey in nuclear or thinking about jumping in, this podcast is for you. Welcome back to Powered by Passion, where we meet the young professionals shaping the future of nuclear science and technology. Today's guest is Laura Wheatley, an inspiring young professional who is navigating a fascinating career path in nuclear fusion, energy policy, and international cooperation. From being a PhD student in the prestigious Nuclear Fusion CDT program in the UK to working briefly for the UK Government Office for Science, Laura now contributes as an associate nuclear fusion engineer at the International Atomic Energy Agency. We hear more about her journey, her experiences working in both national and international settings, and her advice for those looking to enter the nuclear sector. Let's start. This is Powered by Passion. Welcome, Laura. To start, tell us a bit about your academic journey in nuclear fusion and how you became interested in this field.
So when I was at school, I really enjoyed studying sciences and maths. So when I was 17 and 18, I picked to do physics, chemistry, maths and further maths. And then I was very lucky to get an offer of material science at the University of Oxford. So I'd always liked chemistry, I'd always liked doing sort of physical sciences. And when I got to study my degree, I really enjoyed that sort of practical side, the research side. And I thought I want to do something else after this that's linked to what I've already studied. So I had the opportunity to look at PhDs. And in my last year of my master's, during my undergraduate, I did a project on superconductors, where I looked at the microstructure of superconductors. So these can be used to produce high field magnets, and they can be run at very low temperatures. So I really enjoyed my projects. I thought I want to do a PhD project that's something similar to that. And luckily at the University of Oxford, there was actually a project that was looking at superconductors, a different material, using a different technique called atom probe tomography. So that's something I found really interesting, and I just applied for it because I thought it's interesting, it's research, and it's also with supervisors who I really liked. So I just applied for it and I thought, right, so I need to get some funding for this now. How does that work? I got the offer first for the PhD, and then the funding was actually provided through a Fusion for Centre doctoral training, which was a fusion school. So this is through several universities. So the University of York, University of Liverpool, University of Manchester, University of Durham, University of Oxford. So this is, I think, similar in different countries as well. There's these sort of schools that are set up. So this particular school focused on material science and also plasma physics. So the first part of my PhD program, I basically went to the University of York and we did 3 weeks of lectures on all things fusion. And until that point, I'd never really considered looking at nuclear fusion. It was more that I was interested in the research and it happened to come up. And that was really interesting because it's something I really had not considered before. But anyway, in those first 3 weeks, there was a cohort of 10 of us. And I really enjoyed meeting everyone. We all had different backgrounds, lots of physicists, people from chemistry and different backgrounds. And I really enjoyed learning about fusion. And as I said, I knew nothing about it. And it sort of ignited something in me. And I thought, right, in the future, I want to work in this. So I did several years of the PhD. And in my sort of third year, we had the opportunity to do an internship. And that's when I looked at expanding on fusion and I thought maybe policy, what could I do in policy that's related to fusion? So I had a 3-month funded internship as part of my PhD programme. And I worked at the Government Office for Science in the UK, and I worked under the Chief Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister. So that was really exciting because on my first day in the office, you don't expect to see the chief scientific advisor there, and he walks in, and I've seen him on the TV because he's done all the COVID briefings. So that was really exciting. It's like seeing a bit of a celebrity. And he says hello to you when you first walk in, which was really nice. Anyway, I wrote a report on the co-benefits of fusion in the UK. And that was a really exciting bit of work that I did for that department. And I got to work with different companies in the UK, startups, and also the public sector in the UK. So that's what really got me interested in fusion, both the public policy side and also looking at the research side.
And after completing your studies, you quickly transitioned from being a student to working at an international organization. How did you navigate that change?
So I really did quickly move from being a student to working in an international organisation. I actually handed in my thesis in early November, and I actually moved to Vienna at the end of November that same year. So it was quite intense, the turnaround. As I mentioned, I did an internship a couple of years before in government, and I really decided that I wanted to do something that was policy related and related to fusion. This particular opportunity, it was actually sent to me by a friend who I'd been talking to. She was a couple of years older than me on the same fusion programme. And she sent the opportunity in a job advert to me and said, this is something you should apply for. It's something that will be interesting for you. Why don't you have a go? The actual job role was an energy analyst role at the start, and it was related to nuclear fission, not fusion. I said, it's not exactly what I want to do. Maybe it's not the right thing for me. Maybe I'm not good enough. And maybe it's also not quite the right job role for me. Anyway, she convinced me that I should have a go and I should try. And even if it's not exactly what I wanted to do at the start, it's a fantastic opportunity. And very few people get these opportunities. So why don't I have a go and I try? So I applied for the job role. There was a series of filtering stages, and then there was also a final interview where I had people on my new team asking me questions on the economic side of fission, which I knew very little about, but I used what I knew. And anyway, then it took a few months to then get the job role, and then I moved to Vienna. So in terms of how I would say going about this, I was slightly nervous about moving to a new country because I'd never moved out of the UK before. I don't speak German. I'd never studied German at school. I only studied Spanish and French, and not very well either. So it was very new and exciting, but also very challenging. But I knew that in Vienna, a lot of people speak English, and at the UN itself, everyone speaks English. That's the working language. So in a way, that was less scary. I also have a long-term partner who's based in London, and that was a little bit terrifying, working out how I'm going to move country and how that's going to work. So there was some anxiety about moving and doing something different, but I also knew that this is an opportunity that if you get an offer like this, it's very difficult to refuse it. And I knew that if it's maybe 1 year or 2 years, it's worth it in the long run, one for my career, but also meeting loads of new people and living somewhere different and exciting. So that's why in my head I decided that even though it was scary, it was worth doing.
So in Vienna, you started working at the International Atomic Energy Agency, first as energy analyst and recently in a new position as an associate nuclear fusion engineer. Could you share a bit about your role involved day to day?
Yes, I think I'll give a little bit of introduction of what the IAEA is first. It was set up in 1957 after President Eisenhower from the United States did his speech, Atoms for Peace. And it was effectively to control the rising tensions with nuclear powers in the world and to try and have an international agency that could control that. And out of that, it's come out multiple different applications. So, for example, the department that I'm working in is nuclear energy specifically. This is both my previous role and my new role. And day to day in my previous role, I was in the economics team looking at nuclear fission. I was working on a model that was looking at an energy system and looking at the balance of difference, for example, renewables, and we had fossil fuels and we had nuclear. And it's a levelized cost model, and you basically change different parts of the model depending on the situation you want, and you see what the levelized cost is going to be, and then how many units of different kinds of electricity are going to be used throughout a year. So this was used one as a training model, which the IAEA do training schools in different countries around the world. And also it was used, we were going to do some studies on it as well to see what would happen in different situations, how this might favour or hinder nuclear. So that was one of the roles I was looking at. And then the other role was looking at the application of hydrogen production from nuclear power. So there are several different projects and business cases that are ongoing at the moment around the world. And it's looking at the economic wins and how that has changed, how these projects have either been viable or not viable. And from an economics point of view, whether hydrogen can be produced from nuclear in the future. So that was what I was doing previously. During my first year, again, that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in fusion, and I knew the agency worked in fusion. I was actually at a talk with my old team, and someone from the nuclear fusion team came and spoke right at the end to some member countries, member states. And I was sitting there, I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I didn't know we even did this. So I dropped him a message, dropped him an email and said, can we go for a coffee? I'm really interested in what you're doing. Can we have a chat? So I got in touch with Ryan, and we basically built up a relationship, and he kind of became a mentor to me, and said, oh, well, you have a fusion background. Why are you not working on fusion? We'd like you to work with us in future. So over a few months, we built up a relationship, and the British Embassy also knew my fusion background. So they basically helped me to get this other position as well, to work in fusion. So what I would say is do some networking specifically to get where you want to be in the future. But when it comes to what I do today now, I'm working specifically on different events the IAEA is hosting on fusion. So for example, we have a codes and standards meeting that's coming up. I'm going to get to do some traveling for that. This is bringing international collaboration together to work on the codes and standards that need to be developed for fusion. And we analyse what they are, and then we can start building on working on that. There's also different meetings that we do, for example, tritium breeding blankets. We've got one coming up later in the year. So it's specific topics that the community sees holes in that need addressing, and we bring international partners together and we tend to host the meetings. So we don't tend to lead the research ourselves. We bring everyone together and try and get people talking. We host events, we host the meetings. So that's exciting, and then hopefully this year I'll get to do some international travel as well. Hopefully getting to go to China towards the end of the year for the World Fusion Energy Conference.
And in general, what excites you the most in being part of such a big international nuclear community?
I find it really exciting that I get to work with all nationalities. So in the IAEA, even in my office, I've worked with people from Rwanda, I've worked with Chinese colleagues, I've worked with Russian colleagues, I've worked with lots of different colleagues who I'd probably not come across if I was staying in the UK. And it's actually very interesting to put perspective on developments that might be going on in, for example, the UK and the fusion community, and what else is going on in the rest of the world. And I also find it very interesting as a cultural exchange. I've learned a lot about people's different cuisines, a lot in terms of how people treat each other, what kind of cultural norms. For example, you might give a gift for someone, whereas in the UK we'd be sort of hostile and we wouldn't do that. And I find that really interesting. You get to work with people from different backgrounds and cultures. And one thing I would say I'm very lucky to speak English as my first language, and people ask me to do certain translations. However, I do feel like sometimes I wish I spoke another language as well. So you do get a bit of jealousy too.
Beyond the challenges you already mentioned with the transition from studies to work, of course, in general, challenges can often arise in studies, research or policy. Can you share a moment when you faced a significant challenge, for example, at work or after your studies?
So I think there's actually quite a lot of similarity between starting a PhD and starting work, but in a different area, because you're starting in something where you know very little about it. You've trained so many years to be good at something, and you start something totally new and you don't know anything, basically. You're starting afresh and you have to learn from experience. So for example, in my PhD, I found the first year incredibly hard. because I was doing something totally new to me in the sense that I didn't know the technique, I was learning from scratch, and I hated the fact that I didn't know what I was doing. And I think for someone who maybe has done quite well in the past at what they've tried, I found it very hard to not know what I was doing and to be comfortable with that, and to give myself time to allow myself to grow and learn the skills. So I felt that in my first year of my PhD. And then when I moved to Vienna and I started this analyst role where I knew very little about nuclear fission, I knew nothing about economics, but someone had told me I'm good enough to do this because they'd hired me, I found it very hard to tell myself you can do this because it was not my skill set at all. So I would say the hardest moments have been starting something new, but through proving that I can do it, I'm getting used to that now. So I'd say that's a kind of common challenge that probably can be applied to most people.
Fusion research is definitely an exciting field. What advice would you give to students considering a career in the sector? What would you say to someone exploring these opportunities?
If someone was looking at nuclear fusion, I would say, one, look at all the different investments that have gone into private companies recently. So, for example, if you look into the US and the UK, there are so many companies that have been developing, have had lots of investments from private firms. And there's a huge developing sector. And that's something to be excited about because that means there are lots of jobs that are going to be on offer. So it's exciting, there's going to be lots of development, and that means not just an engineer, but there'll also be further jobs around that. You can't build a company with just the engineers. So I would say to someone who maybe isn't from the typical engineering background or like me, material science background, that actually it's an exciting field to work in because it's a bit of a mission as well. If we can get nuclear fusion to work, you can effectively have limitless energy. And that's a very exciting prospect. And if you're someone like me that's quite mission driven, I would say that it's an exciting field to go into. And it's something that really does give you a drive and a focus, and that you are moving forward with something very, very exciting. And one of the bit of advice I'd give to anyone, whether you're going into nuclear fusion or you're just early careers and have been in science, I would say get a mentor, because I think the best advice that I've got is from people who have been in a similar position to me but are older than me, who've given me some advice and told me what to maybe either steer away from or to surround myself with good people or to get some work experience. So I would say definitely get a mentor. It might not be who you're directly working with, but drop an email to someone you find inspiring and see if they get back to you. It doesn't hurt.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing your story and giving us such valuable insights. It's exciting to hear how varied a career in nuclear can be, spanning research, policy, and international collaboration. To our listeners, if you're exploring opportunities in nuclear or just curious about the many paths this sector offers, stay with us for more inspiring journeys. Remember to follow us on Spotify and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next episode. Until next time, stay inspired, stay curious, and stay powered by passion. Powered by Passion is co-organized by the European Nuclear Society and the European Nuclear Society Young Generation Network, IFOM Early Careers Group, the International Radiation Protection Association YGN, and the FuseNet Association Student Council. The Pros-YGN collaboration is set up with the support of the NN2+ project, the largest and most integrative nuclear education and training efforts up to date in nuclear ENT. NN2+ is funded by the European Union.